So in this tutorial we're going to talk a little bit about model sheets and character modeling. We're going to start really simple with a robot because a robot can be made up of a lot of different parts, and the parts don't necessarily have to flow into one another the way they would with like a person or an animal. What you see in front of you is a really kind of quick and basic model sheet, and a model sheet is a reference for an animator or an artist or a 3D modeler to be able to create a character consistently over and over again. And I'm going to hit play here because this is actually a time-lapse video of me drawing this model sheet so that you can kind of see a little bit of the process here. So when I create a model sheet, I create one view, in this case a side view of my character, and then I draw all these reference lines to show the height of certain features. And that allows me to make sure that the character is the right height, that the feet are at the same height, and that when I model this from an orthographic viewpoint, the character's features will mostly line up. Now this is still hand drawn, so there's going to be some imperfection. We'll talk a little bit about how to deal with that, and I mean there's some imperfection in the drawing now, but basically that's kind of how I start with a model sheet. You can get a lot more involved with a model sheet. For instance, if you look at the model sheet for the character Sintel from one of the Blender Open movies a few years back, this is obviously a lot more involved, a lot more detailed. There are alternate hairstyles here, alternate costume pieces, and there's detail references here for that we don't necessarily know what the top of this shoulder pad looks like from any of our views here, so they've given us a detail call out where we can see a little bit more, or actually sorry, that's probably this hip guard. We can see a little bit more detail, and also you can tell that this character has a lot more thought put into her. This character has basically a past. She's got a tattoo on her shoulder. She seems to be, there's kind of a whole Celtic knot thing going on here with her boots, and her shin guards don't necessarily match. In fact, one of her legs I'd say is unguarded. She's got some rips in her trousers here, and this character's kind of held together with string and little bits of leather. So you can tell that there's a past implied here, and that's important for a character to be able to have, to seem to inhabit a world, so that you know how to treat them, you know how to write them, you know how to animate them, you know how they should walk, that sort of thing. But for today we're just kind of going to talk about how to basically get set up with a model sheet and modeling a character. So to start off with, I'm going to go to an orthographic viewport, and I'm going to go to one of my named viewports. So tap 1 on the number pad and go to my front view, and I'm going to delete my default cube and go to Add, Shift A, an image, and it's going to be a reference image, and I'm going to select my model sheet that I made. And this is a front view, so I'm going to kind of align this with the front view. And over here where I have my image attributes here, I'm going to check the opacity checkbox and turn that down a little bit so that I can see my axes through this and try to align this a little bit more precisely. And I can tell that my drawing here is not symmetrical. I didn't really take the time to do that, but this works. Okay, so now let's go to a side view, and we will align the right side. I can actually just do the same thing again. I can do an image reference and bring in my artwork here, and then align the right side view kind of with an axis. The character is not symmetrical in this axis, so perfect alignment is not critical. But vertically I want these aligned the same way so that you can kind of turn them and see that, yeah, okay, they intersect. And that's probably a good idea to sort of have that, the crown of the head intersecting there. So that'll be how I align that horizontally. Just I want it to be right at the top of this sort of egg shape here. Okay, and that looks pretty good. It's a little visually confusing, so I'm going to do a couple of things that I always do here, and I'm going to organize my front view. Actually, we'll call this, just so it's if I can type reference dash front view, reference dash side view. Okay, and if I select both of these in the viewport here, I can put them into a collection just by tapping M, new collection. We'll call this references. And so they're now in their own collection. I'm going to open my filters here and turn on the ability to change the selectability of my objects, and I'm going to eventually turn off selectability for those so that I'm not dealing with accidentally clicking on them. One other thing I'm going to do though, I'm going to select each of my references here, and I'm going to check this box that says only axis aligned, and that will make them disappear when I'm not directly on axis with them. Now I'm going to set them to unselectable, and from a front view I'll be able to see my front reference image, and from a side view I'll see my side reference image, but I won't really see them in between those views. Alright, so to start off with, as far as modeling goes, I'm going to just kind of crash through this really quickly because there's not a lot of new skills here that I haven't covered in the other tutorials, but I'm going to start with a UV sphere, which normally for a character I wouldn't, but where this is a robot, I think it's probably going to be okay. And the reason I wouldn't normally start with a UV sphere for a character, holy cow, my fingers are misaligned on the keyboard. No, they're not. How come I can't select anything here? Okay, so I'm recognizing that I've made a pretty easy mistake to make here, and that is that my references collection is unselectable, and when I created my sphere, that was my most recently active collection. So my sphere is inside an unselectable collection. So let's fix that. There we go. All right. So GZ, I'm going to align the top there. Now the reason I wouldn't normally use a sphere to create a character is that a sphere has a triangle fan on the top and the bottom, and you generally don't want to have to deal with those triangles with a character. In this case, all the objects are going to be separate, so I'm just going to put in a sphere because I know that it's probably not going to come back to bite me. So I'm going to delete the bottom of my sphere there. And now I'm going to alt-click to select the bottom of this loop here. And I can either create a triangle fan, or else I can extrude and scale it in, and then I might just go to my edge menu, my face menu, and do a grid fill. And that actually works pretty well. That way I don't have more triangles. So with this bottom selected, I'm going to try to approximate the rest of the shape here with my my proportional editing turned on. So let's move that up, then scale in not Z. We'll just see if we can kind of create the right shape. Let's see how that looks from the side. That's pretty good. So we're already seeing, you know, a lot of the imperfection in my drawing here. And actually I went down too far there. GZ. There we go. We're already seeing a lot of the imperfection in my drawing. But that's okay, because we knew what it was when we picked it up. Alright, so there's body part number one. I'm going to call this head-dome. And now I will use, I think, probably an extrusion to just form the rest of this part here. So let's just scale this whole thing up. Extrude in Z, EZ, and then scale it downward. Yeah. So when you actually have something that's supposed to be kind of symmetrical and it doesn't turn out to be symmetrical perfectly, you just kind of have to pick a side. So in this instance, I'm going to favor the right side and never look back. So, all right. There's sort of the base object of the character, and now I am free to kind of model the rest of it. I'm going to add a cylinder for the eyeball here, rotating X by 9, whoop, and it got added to the references collection again. Okay, I need to watch for that. RX90. We'll scale this thing down, and I think it probably has an n-gon cap by default because I didn't change anything, but we're going to end up deleting all of that anyway. So I'm not too concerned about it, and I'm just going to kind of scale it in the y-axis. I'm going to pop it out here. And I can see that I've misjudged the amount of recession that this eyepiece will need to be this far forward from a side view and also be completely visible from a front view. You can see that it's coming inside the head just a little, so we're just going to adjust. You just have to do that. So tab into edit mode, there's my n-gon. I'm going to delete that face. Select all these edges and extrude and scale, and here's where we can kind of start to add some detail and get fancy. We're going to extrude this in the y-axis, extrude and scale, extrude, bring it back in the y-axis, extrude and scale, ES, EY, ES, whoa, we've got ES, okay. ES, there we go. I must have been hitting the wrong key there. Alright, and I think that's probably pretty good and detailed for the little lens of our robot's eye. So I'm going to close this one off with a triangle fan, just because grid fill doesn't tend to be very kind around the edges when we do like a subsurf modifier, and this is going to be fairly visible. So one quick way to make a triangle fan is extrude and scale, and then just tap 0 to extrude everything to 0. And this isn't quite ready yet because we have like 32 vertices in the center here where we just need 1. And so what I'm going to do is just select that center with a multiple selection, right click and go to merge vertices and click by distance, and you can see that that removed 31 of them. So now we've just got one vertex, everything's joined in the center there, and we can sort of bulge this thing out like it's a lens just a little bit. If we really want to, if we really want to, we can add some detail there with some additional layers of loops. GY, and just kind of have those stick out from a side view to sort of give a little bit of curvature to our lens. And that's kind of nice. Okay, so we need to create another eye. Let's call this head-eye. And I think the other eye can probably just be a copy of this first one. Shift D and then scale it down. And I have these eyes asymmetrical to kind of give the character some appeal. Asymmetry is a good way to give a character some appeal, and that's kind of fun. That's a fun look for the character. So let's see, we're several minutes into this tutorial right now. I don't know if I'm going to be able to give this enough time to actually finish it, but we'll see what we can do fast. So I'm going to box model these leg pieces. We'll create a cube. Rotate that and scale it. And I now need to scale this a little bit more. So I'm going to scale it along its original z-axis, which is now at a tilt. So S double Z will select that original axis. G, Z, Z will also tilt it along that original axis. So that's kind of a handy trick. Okay. And I think I'm actually going to swap the thickness of these two pieces. So I've got the upper leg piece outside of the shin piece, and I think I'm going to put it inside. So it's going to be the length of the shin piece, and then I think that'll make more sense. So there's my upper leg piece, and we're going to give this some curvature just really quickly with a subdivision surface modifier. Give it a couple of subdivision steps and then tab into edit mode, conform our edit cage to our modifier, and scale in X. We'll do some loop cuts here. Okay, do a loop cut here. And that will kind of give us some little bit of sharpness to the edges there. Now we're going to duplicate this piece and just bring it downward. Scale it in X. And we'd probably have to do some cutting in the middle here if this were going to be actually a production character rather than just quick and dirty for a tutorial. We'll probably use another sphere, UV sphere, to create the foot. Okay. And we'll treat that kind of the same way. Delete those vertices. Extrude and scale, and then we'll do a grid fill. All right, and this kind of narrow slice of foot piece back here, this is sort of a unique piece, but I kind of envision it as this sort of blade thing. So we will, well, let's see, scale it in X. And then we'll extrude. Just kind of Okay, and I really want to flatten this out so that it's good and flat, so let's rotate the whole thing SZ0 so that they're all aligned on an axis, and then rotate the whole thing as one piece. Alright, that's actually looking pretty good. So at this point, basically, I just kind of need to model the mouth and the tooth and the antenna. And the mouth we can probably just do with box modeling. So let's make a cube. And on this one, I'm actually going to cut it in half and delete half of it, and then apply a mirror modifier so that I only have to do all of these parts once. So GY. Alright, and we're going to kind of bend this mouth around the character. So, whoa. Let's make sure we don't have any extra vertices here. Okay, and we do. So I need to do another level of undo. That's something to be careful of when you extrude. If you hit escape to cancel the extrude command, always make sure that you've hit undo until you don't have those extra vertices created by extrude stuck in there. Okay, extrude, scale in Z, extrude, scale in Z, GZ, extrude, scale in Z, GZ. So basically, I'm just going to create this in one axis at a time. Oh. All right, and now I'm going to change something about my reference images. I'm going to take my side view reference image, and I'm going to tell it to be in front, so that I can kind of see what's going on here even in a solid viewport. Okay, so now I can select these individual loops. Whoop. All right, GY up. GY. Goodness, I messed up there, didn't I? So what I'm doing right now is I'm just kind of using my named viewports to make sure that I'm not moving these in an axis that I don't want them moved in. So I'm moving these from a top orthographic viewport to make sure that they don't move in Z. They're not moving in my Z axis at all. Okay, let's see what that looks like. Not very good. But I think it's a start on the shape that I want. So I can sort of bring it around the side here, move it out in X. Proportional editing can save so much time in the long run. Okay, and that's looking a little better. And I think that I can scoot these along their axes to kind of narrow that shape. So Shift V will scoot a vertex along its axis. One thing I often tell my students is it's going to look horrible until it looks right. And this is certainly fitting that description. It's improving fast, but boy, it started out pretty iffy. Okay, so that looks like a decent start on the mouth. I'm going to add a subdivision surface modifier to smooth that out. We'll smooth shade it. And then we'll do some loop cuts to sharpen up the edges a little bit. Oh, those already have loop cuts there. Alright, so that's looking a little better. I can definitely smooth that out, but you don't necessarily need to watch me do that. That's probably sufficient for this tutorial. It's run a little long. I can smooth shade things and make them look a little better. But for the most part, that is kind of the basic approach to box modeling a character from a model sheet. I hope this is helpful. Have a great day.